13th episode of Accessibility Now, stories about accessibility in Georgia. Accessibility Now is a podcast produced by the statewide Independent Living Council of Georgia. I'm your host, Desi Gillespie, and today marks our first episode in a series we're calling States of Accessibility. We'll be looking beyond Georgia, speaking to other SILCGA directors and activists about their personal stories, why they do the work that they do in their states and their communities. But for our first episode, we're staying right here talking with Shelly Simmons, Executive Director of Georgia's statewide Independent Living Council. We've spoken to Shelly many times as part of our usual coverage for Accessibility Now, but recently we sat down to get an idea of the person behind the advocacy and learn what made Shelly who she is today.
I grew up in California, Southern California, Los Angeles, a little city called Inglewood. I wanted to be a veterinarian. And so that was my thing. And I realized that I could not physically handle an animal. Didn't want to be involved in research or anything like that. So I changed. And actually, I thought about sports broadcasting. But at the time, it was a male-dominated organization or business. I said, well, let me move on to something else. I did not see myself in this role. In fact, nothing disability-related that I see myself being involved in. I was diagnosed when I was 13. I received my first wheelchair at 27. My diagnosis is limb-girdle syndrome, and that means that the proximal muscles to the torso, like the upper shoulder, upper hip area, those are the weakest. And the further away the muscle extends from the body, like in the hands and feet, the stronger it was. But now that's weak as well. So climbing stairs or standing up, those things became challenging. I was told that by my late 20s that I probably would be in a wheelchair. And I fought it for as long as I could. But I started falling all the time, just clumsy. And when I started to break things, I said, well, maybe it's time to have a seat. I broke my nose, broke my arm, and then it's like, okay, we can't have anything worse. I was very active as a young adult, kind of how I ended up being an advocate. They were just trying to give me a manual chair, and I didn't have the upper body strength to push it on my own. So I fought finally for a power chair and was able to receive that. And the crazy thing is, again, when it came, it sat in the living room for about a week. I said, okay, this makes no sense. But as crazy as it sounds, my chair gave me my independence back. I was able to get around without fear of not breaking anything. I wasn't nervous about moving around. I didn't limit myself as to where I was able to go. But it was also very scary because I knew once I got in the chair, that would be it. I wouldn't get out. And I didn't want to let that go. But again, hindsight, it gave me my independence. I ended up going back to school. Again, just finding the resources. But the transition, it was challenging for me. And it took a little while because I felt as though I'm not Shelly anymore. But Shelly is not that person that has to be up around walking. That doesn't make Shelly who she is. And so I think just getting over fear for myself, just fear, not knowing what to expect, what other people are looking to expect from me. I was doing broadcasting at that point. And from there, I went on back to school and received a communications degree and started working in a production house, worked for an organization where we produced commercials. And so I was the director's right-hand person, setting up things and making sure that our subcontracting directors, setting them up with the right people. But in the production world, the hours are just super crazy. And then also at that particular time, my health was taking another decline. So with my disability, for me anyway, once I would hit a decline, things would taper off for several years. And then I would take what I would call a dip in my health. And things just kind of became worse. And that's how I ended up going back to a Center for Independent Living, trying to figure out, okay, what can I do now? Again, the hours for a production company can be very long, and I just wasn't physically able to do that anymore. And when I saw people working, because I still didn't see a whole lot of people with disabilities out and about working. They were, doing certain things, but not in the areas that I would like to go to or do things that I was interested in. I didn't want to be a greeter. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but I just needed something that was a little bit more stimulating. And so that's when I thought, okay, wow, okay, this is something that, I could possibly do. And just kind of did some volunteer work. And then I was referred to a voc rehab office in California and started working with them, found out about the Center for Independent Living, ended up working for an organization in Long Beach called Disability Resource Center. And so it was more of, it can't be this hard. What can I do to make it a lot easier? I was I want to call it a navigator, disability navigator. And so I helped inform individuals how they could work and still maintain their benefits to a certain degree. It was a learning experience. I was fired up. I was energetic to be willing to be able to pass this information along as I was learning it. I received a vehicle through voc rehab at the time. So I got an accessible van, which made it a lot easier for me to get around, to do my job and just go about living my daily life. And things were a lot easier at that time. I don't know if they still do those type of things. But working with the actual consumer, what I was able to learn, I used for myself and passed it along. And so that was my main responsibility at the center.
Shelly moved on to a different center and a different position in Anaheim, but still, she began to feel restless. She had grown up on the West Coast, and she was starting to see that there was work to be done on behalf of people with disabilities in other parts of the country as well.
I was just ready for a change. Born and raised in California, and was just looking for something different. It's crazy because at the time I was looking around. I thought about the D.C. area. That's where my mother had grew up, but I didn't want to have to deal with the winters. My parents had retired to Arizona. I went there, but it just didn't catch me. And I had a couple of friends that I went to high school with that were living here. So I came here one year on vacation. It's like, oh, this is not bad. Okay, I like it. Moving to Georgia, it was everything was slow for me compared to California. And in my mind, I was like, oh my God, you guys don't have this, you don't have that. What's happening? What's happening here? And so that was one reason why I also wanted to get involved, to try to help bring some of the things and policies that we had in California here, or at least try to. I went to Disability Link, one of the Centers for Independent Living, Just wanted to see about different resources, find out, what's happening here in Georgia, submit a resume, working with the employment coordinator at the time, because at that time I was ready to get to work and do some things. And then moved over here to the SILCGA office, which was actually right upstairs from Disability Link at the time. And that's where I felt more useful is doing the policy work. Policies that will have a positive effect on individuals with disability and for a larger group of people instead of just one individual. And that can be a tedious process that I'm finding out. Things that we have been working on for years, and we're still trying to make headway. It's challenging. Every day is something different. And the same can be said with working with an individual, of course. But the policy, I think, meeting, quote unquote, the powers that be, working with legislators and other state agency administrations, I think meeting and seeing how they're thinking, what are they considering, and how are they getting their information, and finding out that they have no individuals with disabilities represented, I think helps them or causes them not to fully think things out instead of going to a horse's mouth and getting the information that they need to make critical decisions. And I'd like to think that we are making headway. Georgia SILCGA has been in existence for at least 28 years, and my predecessor, Patricia Puckett, was the only director here other than myself. We've had two over the last 28 years. I was working up under Pat Puckett for a while, and she was grooming me. I didn't know it. And she was like, hey, I'm going to retire the next year. And I'm like, well, when you're going to start looking? She said, well, I already found her. I'm like, wait, what? And so I was like, no, I don't. She's like, yeah, the time is now. The time is now.
That was 6 years ago. And in the time since, Shelly and SILCGA have done some big things, not least of all expanding their media presence with a podcast and a documentary. But here's what, in Shelly's mind, represents their biggest accomplishments in such a short time.
We have 2 expansion offices here in the state now, so 9 sales and 2 expansion, and with the hopes of them becoming their own standalone entities. So Columbus was part of Michael's sale, and they helped train and educate that director. Northwest was a part of Disability Link. Now they're their own standalone entity. So we usually try to attach them to an established center, and then from that, they're able to stand alone. The 2 expansion centers was a big deal because that is all done with state money. So it took a lot of advocating, a lot of educating to get this funding. We still have at least 29 counties that need to be covered, and a lot of those counties are underserved. So even if we are able to completely cover the state, we need multiple centers because it really stretches and limits, I think, the ability for the centers to do true hard work when you're still probably 100 miles from, within your region, your service area, because you could cover as many as 14 counties. So with our expansion, hopefully we can cover the whole state. And granted, there's rural Georgia, but regardless of that, everyone deserves access to resources. And just try to make it easier for people to get around, to get to a center, or for a center staffing to get to an individual, we need to have more centers that are out there. I think another big thing was when we were able to get our home access program back off the ground. That was a program that went away during the housing crisis. There used to be $300,000 in home improvements or home modifications for individuals with disabilities. We were able to advocate and get that funding started again. Although the money fluctuates, we at least have $100,000. The word has gotten out. We received so many calls. People are in desperate need of sometimes minimal minor repairs or modifications to help make their home more accessible, easier to navigate. But, we thought we did great this year, and that money was vetoed or the language was disregarded, but we'll continue to fight for that. We're fighting for equal opportunity in regards to employment. People like myself have a hard time finding decent employment because they will lose access to their in-home care if they earn too much money. So this is a huge policy that we're working on. We really hope that we can make headway this year and try to educate our legislators about that. This is something that Pat was working on before she left. So what makes it challenging is that in-home care is not a part of our state plan, Georgia's state plan. There's always policy that needs to be corrected. And what we're also working with and partnering now is an organization called Caring Across Generations. And here in Georgia, we're calling it Care Can't Wait. And we're advocating and fighting for and trying to educate about the need to pay caregivers or DSP, direct support providers, equitable pay to help take care of loved ones the way that they should be. Right now, caregivers or direct support providers earn less than a dog groomer annually. That makes no sense to me. Why should somebody helping take care of a loved one have to work 2 and 3 jobs in order to make ends meet? And when you're only paying the bare minimum, maybe $10 an hour, who can live like that? The turnover rate is astronomical. It's hard to keep somebody because I think now, you can go somewhere, you can go and earn more at McDonald's in some places. We need to be able to take care of the people that have to take care of, I think, the most precious commodity here in Georgia, and that's its residents.
It certainly hasn't been easy, but Shelly knew what she was signing up for when she came to Georgia, a place she said was behind the times on disability rights and needed to catch up. The difficulties have taught her a few valuable lessons on fighting for widespread change as a nonprofit director.
I think I was placed in a very good position. Pat Puckett laid a very solid foundation. I think patience is key. For the first year, I was, oh, you're the new Pat. And then finally, oh, hey, Shelly, So it took patience of me. I didn't want to damage or destroy anything that she had already established or put in place. So I was very careful to take it slow and keep what she had put in place, keep it going. And then you can start to put your stamp on it. And I think that's what I've been able to do. But I think patience. Now, some people have to come in and do a whole lot. But I was very fortunate to have a very solid foundation and just develop those relationships. I think when you can collaborate or partner with state agencies, other grassroots organizations, that makes your job that much easier. Find one or two things that you're passionate about and go for it. I think my first year, I tried to put too many irons in the fire, and nothing got hot, nothing took off. And so I had to kind of back up. It's like, okay, what do I need to do? Take 2 or 3 things that you know that you can make some serious progress with, make a dent in it, and run with that. There are always needs, but find the ones that jump out the most and work with that. For patience, for sure.
We'd like to extend a big thank you to Shelly for sharing the story behind her advocacy with us today. And thank you for listening to States of Accessibility. This has been our Georgia episode, and we hope to expand into more of the 50 states of SILCGA in the near future. Keep a lookout for new episodes released as part of Accessibility Now. To learn more about the statewide Independent Living Council of Georgia, you can visit silcga.org. That's SILCGA.org. This has been your host, Desi Gillespie, and I'd just like to close by reminding you that a Georgia that includes everyone is better for all of us.